The Liberal Party officially has a new leader, and the country, a new Prime Minister in waiting.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
We are Canada strong. Vive la Canada!
It was a landslide win, with 86% of the vote going to Carney. But now comes the hard part. And the question is, can he save the Liberal Party from what looked like, just a couple of months ago, a surefire defeat in the next election? Let's go through it. Carney's win wasn't unexpected. The polls have consistently shown that he was the front runner to lead the Liberal Party. But it's probably fair to say most people weren't expecting this much of a blowout.
It was bigger than Pierre Poilievre's in terms of share of the vote, certainly bigger than Justin Trudeau's when he won.
It was not even remotely close. His nearest competitor, Chrystia Freeland, got 8% of the votes.
This was a really sweeping, a landslide victory that I don't think anybody expected would be that big.
Part of what propelled Carney appears to be that he was the only candidate able to convince the party he could bring change.
You sneaky, you're running as an outsider.
I am an outsider.
So Mark Carney has the advantage of saying, hey, I am not a career politician. I have not been in this game. I'm coming in now to help save the country.
Right, because Carney's two main competitors in this race, Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould, were anything but outsiders. They were both cabinet ministers under Trudeau, standing behind him for most of his political career. And so they knew any criticism of Trudeau's policies could just ricochet back at them.
We have the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7.
It wasn't about, the macroeconomic picture, which we know is doing okay for Canada.
Carney, meanwhile, had the freedom to say what he really thought.
So our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump. That's the reason I'm here. That's why we need big changes.
He said things like, the economy is weak, and I'm going to make it stronger. Chrystia Freeland, who was very much the architect of that economy, could not say that.
So again, it was no real surprise Carney won this race. But perhaps what is surprising is just how much momentum the Liberal Party now has in the general election poll since he became the frontrunner.
The change we've seen in the polls is one of the biggest we've seen in modern history.
There's no doubt in my mind that the landscape has completely shifted in terms of public opinion in this country.
We're now seeing the Liberals and the Conservatives running neck and neck.
Just check out this Ipsos poll from the end of February. It shows the Liberals actually took a 2-point lead over the Conservatives, overturning a 26-point deficit from what Ipsos was projecting just 6 weeks ago. And more recently, this Angus Reid poll suggests that with Carney as leader, some voters may actually trust the Liberals to deal with US President Donald Trump more than the Conservatives.
Far more Canadians have a positive view than a negative one of him. There's still lots who don't know much about him, so he is still a blank slate for some, but he finds goodwill even among those who voted Conservative in the last election.
And that's meant the narrative around the Liberal Party has shifted from how badly are they going to lose the next election to, can they actually win this?
On Sunday night at the Liberal convention, there was an excitement there that was not there in the Liberal Party. They have hope.
But what makes Carney so appealing to some may also be one of his greatest weaknesses, especially when it comes to rallying support outside the Liberal base.
Mark Carney is still a kind of a rookie at this, and so that's going to be a risk for the Liberals.
When you listen to Carney speak, you can tell he's still transitioning from being a central banker to a political leader.
It's true, I'm not a career politician. I am a pragmatist who knows how to get things done.
So Mark Carney is not a great orator. He is not, the most polished political speaker you've ever heard.
Meanwhile, that ability to inspire, to engage, and to activate a crowd is something his opponent has had plenty of time to hone.
My friends, we will not put up with this any longer. Canada needs change. Common sense Conservatives will bring that change and put Canada first.
There's no doubt that Pierre Poilievre has an ability to motivate his own base. Conservatives, love him. His edginess and the way that he approaches things motivates a lot of people.
And it's not just public speaking, it's also the ability to rally support at the grassroots level, to connect with everyday people, door to door, city to city, something his predecessor was known for.
Day one, a portrait of the Trudeau campaign begins here in Vancouver at the city's Gay Pride Parade.
By comparison, Carney has very little experience playing that game. And we know the Liberals can't win this upcoming general election by just relying on their rank-and-file base. They need to convince all those voters that have drifted over to the Conservative Party over the last couple of years to swing back the other way.
Carney is not an experienced politician. He has never held elected office before. He has not been in the pressure cooker of a campaign before, which, is remarkable to see a prime minister come in with so little actual political experience.
But Poilievre also has a new challenge, because Carney didn't just distance himself from Trudeau through words. He's also planning to axe many of Trudeau's core policies, like the consumer carbon tax and the capital gains tax hike. In the process, he deflated some of the most successful attacks Poilievre had against the Liberals, meaning Poilievre has to reassess his attack lines.
The reason he doesn't want to answer questions from the media is because he gets caught in lies. Ask yourself the question, what is Mark Carney hiding?
I think the Conservatives are probably going to try to find some inconsistencies in Carney's message, because there's going to be probably a lot of them, just because Carney is new to politics and might end up saying things that he doesn't mean to say and then has to go back on it.
And Carney has appeared to make some 180s. That promise we mentioned to scrap the carbon tax, he supported it not that long ago.
He's been focused on climate issues as a central banker, and in the aftermath of that time, working in the private sector, he tried to get a bunch of banks together to invest in climate initiatives. And he didn't really switch to being anti-carbon tax until the start of this election campaign, at least from what we know.
And then, a few weeks ago, Carney came out saying he would do everything he could to accelerate the development of energy projects in Canada.
Something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need.
That, of course, could mean overruling Quebec's wishes, because that province has been against the idea of an east-west pipeline for decades. But when Carney was asked about it a few days later in French, whether he would ever impose a pipeline on Quebec, he said never.
Vous n'imposeriez jamais un pipeline au Québec ou à d'autres provinces?
N'imposerai jamais.
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 But perhaps the most damaging turn of events for Carney so far was when, after months of talk about his success as the governor of the Bank of Canada and claims he deserved credit for shepherding Canada through the 2008 recession.
I remember you from 2008. I thought Canada avoided the worst of that. And I believe you played a very strong role in that.
We did. I mean, thank you. We did.
You're so
The prime minister he worked under at the time called him out, putting one of his biggest professional achievements in question. In a fundraising letter for the Conservative Party, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper wrote, "Carney's experience is not the day-to-day management of Canada's economy during the global financial crisis." And I have listened with increasing disbelief to Mark Carney's attempts to take credit for things he had little or nothing to do with back then.
Politics is not an easy game. It's tough. And especially when you're going up against someone like Pierre Poilievre, who is a take-no-prisoners kind of guy. He will go for the jugular. He will tear you down. He will point out all of your failings day after day.
Now, Carney isn't completely new to these kinds of personal attacks. He did, after all, come out strongly against Brexit during his time as governor of the Bank of England.
It is speculative and beneath the dignity of the Bank of England to be making speculative pro-EU comments.
I'm not going to let that stand.
I think it is quite wrong for a governor of the Bank of England to enter the political fray in this way.
But now, he'll be under even more pressure to respond to criticism. And his job now is to convince the majority of the country he can in fact be trusted to lead Canada during this tumultuous time.
I think that he has to learn a little bit more about some of the political kind of art, how to respond to attacks, even to questions from journalists that might be a little bit more forceful. He's shown himself to be a little bit defensive on some of them. So I think that he will have to improve on those things to be able to pivot to what he would actually prefer to talk about.
So here's what we know. The Liberal Party has a new leader, who is also soon to be a prime minister who has never been elected to public office. He has a lot of support among party loyalists. The question is, can the Liberals capitalize on the momentum